Okay, we'll go ahead and begin. This may be a short meeting, although every time I say that, it turns out not to be. This is the City of San Diego Commission on Police Practices Ad Hoc Transition Planning Committee meeting of Friday the 13th, 2023. Can go ahead and put the agenda up. Present are myself, Doug Case. I am the chair of the committee. We have Commissioner Nancy Vaughn. We have Kate Yevendetti from Women Occupy, who is our liaison to San Diegans for Justice. From our staff, we have Alina Conde, and we have David Niemeyer from CPS HR Consulting, yes, and our outside counsel, Wayne Bennett. Diana Dent will not be able to join us today, and Charmaine, our executive director, and Robin Resendez, our budget person, are busy submitting some budget documents that need to be submitted by today, and so Charmaine said that she would be joining us late. So let's go ahead and go down to the agenda. I assume there's no public comment. Is that correct, Alina?
Sorry, yeah, no.
Okay, then scroll on down. Budget process, as I mentioned, as Charmaine is submitting some things that are due for the mid-year report. I believe that Charmaine's able to make an announcement on the community engagement coordinator, but I don't know for sure. And so if she's able to join us.
Doug, I don't think it's quite official yet. I saw some emails today that they're still kind of finalizing some details.
Okay.
So
and the deputy executive director search. We don't have a deputy. The brochure, electronic brochure, was, I think, finalized this past week, and they'll begin posting that. We are moving forward with the supervising investigator. We have another interview on Wednesday. We have expanded that search, and maybe Dave can give us a update of whether or not we have any additional applicants.
Sure. Yeah. So the supervising investigator, we have republished and added Nate Cole, I think, which should have showed up yesterday. I have done some outreach to some of the names that you and Andrea gave me. And so that hasn't yielded any new candidates to yet. But I mean, this has all just kind of happened in the last week with the holidays and such. So let's see where we're at soon. So I've left that, you know, the revised brochure is basically kind of open-ended. So if we find good candidates in a week or so, it's not like we have to wait 30 days. And as you mentioned, we have another candidate from the initial recruitment we're still talking to. So let's see where we're at in a week or two. Doug, I think on the deputy executive brochure, we just need a little feedback from you on the brochure, on the deadline date. I can send that to you, and then we'll be kind of good to republish that. So I know I'm getting several emails from people who want to apply for that. So that, I think, we'll get a lot of applicants on.
Okay. And the policy analyst and the performance auditor are a little bit further down the road. And I think we decided to wait until we have the deputy executive director on board, since that they'll be reporting to that person. Nothing new on the implementation ordinance or standard operating procedures. Probably we can take that off of the agenda in the future, because that's now a completed item. Nothing new on office space since last week. And and nothing new on standing rules or community outreach. We do have a meeting scheduled with Council Pro Tem Monica Montgomery Stepp next Thursday, I believe, and should be able to get some clarity on a lot of issues then regarding the selection and recruitment process. And we can discuss that a little bit further in a moment.
So who's involved in that meeting, Doug? Just you and Charmaine?
It'll just be me, because one of the discussion items is the selection process for the permanent executive director, and she's recusing herself from any discussions regarding that process, and she will be a likely applicant. So Kevin possibly, but his schedule is fairly tight, so probably will just be me and from the commission. Development of operating procedures. I don't know if anybody has anything new. We did send out all of the ones that Dwayne completed, and I don't know if everybody had a chance to make their way through all those. But if you have any questions, you can feel free to bring them up at the appropriate time. Did anybody have an opportunity to? Everybody got those, right? Okay. And so if you had any questions on that, feel free to ask Dwayne. So that brings us to the recruitment and nominations process for the permanent commissioners, and I don't really have a lot of more information this week than I did last week, other than I think Charmaine sent out a revised memo and application form that indicated a deadline, and deadline is February the 15th. That raises some issues in terms of being able to get our operating procedure docketed and approved in time to be able to implement it for the initial appointments.
Did you say that something also went out from Shawnilo Rivera's office?
And what was that?
About the application process and the deadlines and stuff.
Alina, was what Charmaine distributed?
Yeah, I believe so. It was it was like 3 different links or 2 links, and it had the memo that was sent out.
Okay. And so, and Kate may have not have gotten that because she probably sent it to the commission, right?
Yes, and I also sent it out to the community, but I can send it directly to you, Kate.
Okay. And like I said, we're trying to get that meeting with. Maybe I didn't mention. We're trying to schedule a meeting with Council President Elo Rivera, and then I'm not sure where we are on that. They gave us some dates, and I responded. So I'm not quite sure where we are on that. Elena, do you know?
I'm still waiting to hear back. I sent over the availability that we have, and I just need them to just respond and let me know if any of those dates work for them.
Okay. And I saw at some point a reference to rolling appointments, which is an implication that the appointments may not all be made at the same time. And the question that was raised that I don't know the answer to, and so I'll raise this question with the council members, is how will that affect the interim commissioners. Because they serve until their positions are filled. And so I'm not sure if they don't appoint all 25, whether that means that the interim commissioners will remain on the commission until their seats are filled. And then it also raises the question of what are their seats, because the former commission was all at large, and the new commission will have 9 at large, and the rest will be designated seats. So I'm not sure.
Well, the other thing that's a problem with that is the training schedule.
Exactly. Thank you. And that was the second item is the.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's a good point. Mr. May and I were discussing that too, and that's problematic because the training schedule, which we're going to go over today, is kind of intended to be a group process. It's possible to do it in phases, I guess, to have one group of commissioners who are appointed by a certain time do it and then repeat the entire process. And so, yes, we need to get some clarification on that, because those are two issues: are when they plan on doing that, that does affect our training schedule, and when the terms of the interim commissioners expire. And both of those are an issue if they don't appoint the entire board, the new board all at the same time, or the new commission all at the same time. So any other questions that people think should be raised in the meeting with the council president pro tem or the council president?
I have a question.
Okay.
I think at the last meeting you said that Monica Montgomery Stepp's office really was the one who was designated to deal with this process, and not Shawnila Rivera. So what is the ask of her office when you meet with her that, number one, they set aside this policy 13 so that, because that's just incredibly cumbersome when we're talking about 15 commissioners and everybody having to make a presentation to the city council and all that stuff. And number two, not having it as a rolling process. I guess that's just my questions. Is that what our ask is going to be of her, and ask her to, I'm assuming there has to be a council vote to set aside this policy 13.
And actually our request is not going to be they set it aside, but they amend it to include a provision for how they're going to handle the Commission on Police Practices.
Whatever, so that it's revised, so that it's a reasonable process when we're dealing with 25 appointments.
Yes, exactly. And it's a council process, and so it's appropriate that the communications come from the council president. But my understanding is that the council members are deferring to council member Montgomery Stepp, since she was the person who brought the.
So is that I guess my question continues to be, I think I know the answer, that's the ask that you're going to be making of her in the meeting, for her to make that whatever it would be, a resolution or whatever, to amend that process, and number two, to have the nomination process as a single process and not on a rolling basis.
Right, and I just realized that my headset's not plugged in. Is the background noise creating a problem? If it's not, I'm going to just take off my headset. I don't hear that it is, and so I'll just take it off. Yes, and that they move forward with our proposal for having a nominating committee process, and that they allow time for that process to take place.
which would mean, um, well, the deadline is a deadline for applications, not for the nominations to be vetted and gone to the city council, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
so, yeah. So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So those are the issues that I'll be raising with her. And I assume that that Tiffany and Henry will also be in that meeting. Okay. Anything else on that? So things are kind of in a holding pattern until we have clarification on those issues. In terms of the permanent operating procedure on the review of internal affairs investigations of alleged officer misconduct, I was going to make a couple of revisions based on our discussion this past week, but I haven't had the chance to do that yet. And so the revisions had to do with clarifying IA's process in terms of keeping cases open until they get a recommendation from the CPP when it's possible to do so according to the POBAR deadline. One question that comes out of that is if the commission votes to do an independent investigation, will IA still follow that process? And it's a process that's not mandated by the ordinance, as Dwayne said. So we can make reference to what the department's procedure has been, but it's not something that we can require as part of the operating procedure. And then clarifying that if a case is referred for investigation, that the recommendations of the commission at that point in time would be to review the investigator's report rather than the IA report. Although I assume we would be also agreeing or well, if we have our own findings and they're different than the IA's finding, then it would, I guess, be the equivalent of disagreeing with those findings. But I think process-wise, if it goes to an investigation, our review of the commission's review of the internal affairs report basically dies at that point, and we do our independent investigation, and the action that the commission takes would be to approve the investigator's report. Unless Dwayne has any disagreement with that, I think that's the way that we probably would word it.
Right. Hey, Doug, I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it works, but I would assume that if the commission decides to do its own report, whatever IA has done, the investigators for the commission could look at it and take whatever it wants from it, redo those aspects that it thinks need to be redone, accept what it wants to, and then, render its own independent finding. The commission's finding would be basically a de novo finding from the standpoint of what your investigators decided as opposed to what IA decided. If that makes any sense.
It does. And so, think in our reports in terms of, what the action was on the IA report, instead of agreeing or disagreeing, the action taken was we referred it for an investigation.
Correct.
And so we would probably need to have we would need to have a different category of statistics for that purpose. Okay, and then what I wanted to do today, well, two things. We want to discuss the training process, and so hopefully you have had a chance to review that outline that the staff put together with some input from me. And also to discuss how we want to proceed with our meetings, since as And again, Kate may not have gotten this memo, but all meetings of the commission will need to go back to being in person starting on February the 10th. And there is a process for a commissioner to join a meeting virtually, but there has to be a quorum present in person, and there's some real strict criteria for being able to join a meeting remotely. And I don't have those in front of me, but if you have a medical reason why you can't join, for example, would be a reason, but simply because it's not convenient for you to join would not be a reason to be able to join remotely. And I think maybe Alina and Dwayne can correct me. I think you're limited to two per year. I see Dwayne shaking his head yes. So
Right. I believe that's correct, Doug. It's
Yeah.
very limited.
And so we have to make some decisions on the commission level, how we're going to begin implementing that. But in terms of this committee, I don't think that we want to have in-person meetings every week. And if we're going to have in-person meetings, 12:30 doesn't really work for me because I normally work from 10 to 2. And I'm able to extend my hours or come in early and do the meeting by Zoom. But if it's going to be having to go in person to the meeting, that becomes more problematic. So we can discuss at the end how we want to meet moving forward. My thought is to do it less frequently, and then we can just decide on a time that maybe every other week, and we can decide on a time that works for the members of the committee. So if you can scroll down, Alina, to the training. It's almost toward the very end, I think. Oh, there you are right there, okay. And so the actual dates will depend upon when we have commissioners appointed. So you can kind of use the dates as being relative to each other, but in terms of specific dates or even specific months, may not be is as important as the content. So I can't scroll down, but I think there's 8 components. And then let me just go through them one by one, and if anybody has any why don't you check and see if that's correct? No, I guess there's 10 components, including the meetings. Okay, scroll back up to the first one. We can just go through them. If anybody has any suggestions for other things to include, or feel free to mention them now. So the first component would be opening welcome from the mayor and the council president, having the commissioners introduce each other, and talking about their backgrounds and why they want to be why they applied to be on the commission and so forth. Having somebody from NACOL talk about civilian oversight in a general fashion, talking about the different models and the 13 principles of oversight and so forth. And actually, Alina, maybe you can put in there the 13 principles of a civilian oversight of law enforcement.
Okay.
And then history of oversight in San Diego. So somebody talking about how oversight came to be in terms of the commission on the community review board, how the process for Measure B and the creation of the commission and so forth. And we were thinking about perhaps having some former chairs of the CRB, as well as somebody from SDJ talk about the history in San Diego. Kate.
Yeah, it just seems to me that 6 hours is a long period of time for this, and I was also wondering about silly things like food. I mean, we're going through lunchtime. It just strikes me that this particular component could be reduced somewhat. But, you know, I don't know, maybe not, but that's just my thought. Now, I'm not going through the training, so I'm not gonna have to sit there for 6 hours and listen to it. But
well-
it just seems excessive.
Well, let me just think. So we have well, the overview of law of NACL can be done in an hour. I mean, there is a kind of a standardized webinar that they have used for that. We may end up actually using one of their taped webinars instead of having a person do that. But it's basically an hour presentation. The history of oversight in San Diego could be done in less than an hour, maybe 45 minutes. Introduction of the commissioners. I think we want the commissioners to have the opportunity to get to know one another. And so if you have 25 and you give each of them 3 minutes, that's at least an hour and a half. And the welcome remarks could be 10 minutes each maximum. So what is that?
I don't know, I didn't add it up, but it's not 6 hours.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's go 20 minutes. Let's say an hour.
3.5, something like that. I mean, maybe you should start it after lunch, like at 1, like 1 to 5.
So 3.5. So maybe do it. We could actually do it in 4 hours. And so maybe 1 to 5. And okay, then component 2 is 3 hours, and that includes a tour of the police headquarters and getting their name badges. And I guess we need to and meeting with the chief and the assistant chief and the POA president, and then having somebody from internal affairs do an overview of their process. Okay. And then component 3 was panel presentations on implicit bias, civil or human rights, criminal justice, impacts of racial and identity profiling. And the suggestion was we have somebody from the Office of Race and Equity and perhaps community reps.
And I have the same question. I mean, is that really a 5-hour presentation? And or or could it go until 12 or 12:30?
Yeah, I
I
guess
mean, because I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe the commission will be providing food for people during these meal
we probably
breaks
would, yeah.
times, but
Yeah, we probably would.
it just seems like a lot of time.
yeah, I think that could probably be done in a shorter time and maybe 8:30 to 12:30. We wouldn't have to worry about providing a meal. And I know we talked last week about having some additional topics, but I also suggested that some of those topics could be part of a continuing education. Um, and I'm forgetting which topics were suggested last week.
Well, I think I've raised, talking about mental health issues and
you are.
unhoused issues and, disability, other challenge issues.
And so at the end of this document, why don't we put a list, and we can further develop the list later of continuing education topics. And I think those, you had unhoused issues, disability issues, but was there any others?
Mental health, did you get that?
There's that one.
Okay.
Wayne's gone.
Okay. All three of those are excellent ideas. And so,
Nope, I'm still here.
okay. And so we'll put,
Wayne's here. I'm not.
well, yeah, you have to, you put the, I think I can see you. I don't see your camera, but I see, I see your space, Nancy.
What is wrong with Zoom today?
I'm promoting you again, Nancy. I don't know if you, if it's showing it to you.
It wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing Nancy on my list.
Yeah, but it's still for some reason is showing her as an attendee instead of a panelist.
Huh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on then to component 4. This would be a presentation at the SDPD facility, so that we would get a training from them on the use of force, the laws of arrest and procedures, and have an opportunity to use their simulator.
Can I just say something about that? I think that the commission is, and maybe this is a part of your continuing education, because there'll be a different perspective from the standpoint of what police see as use of force, perhaps laws of arrest, etc., and what another attorney, for example, your general counsel in the future, or I may see. So there may be a variation there. I mean, you could certainly start the commission out by hearing what the police department sees in terms of its appropriate abilities, in terms of use of force, laws of arrest, et cetera, et cetera. But as you know, when we discuss some of these cases in closed session, there are different perspectives. So maybe there needs to be a balance, but I certainly don't object. You certainly should start it out that way to hear exactly what they're doing and what their procedures would be for making these laws. Although there'll be a variation, I'm sure, at some point.
So, yeah, I agree. But I also agree that it's important to have, their presentation, because part of what we're doing is we're evaluating whether or not their officers are following the police department's policies. And so we have to have an understanding of what the police department's policies and training are. And this is also a hands-on component. And so it includes, being able to actually, for example, see the wrap or see different different types of force and how they are used, as well as using the simulator. And so I think that time frame is probably about the same time frame as we've done in the past. And so when we just scroll on down, and
Yes.
Doug, can I just say one other thing? I think, all these are, I know the time, the dates, et cetera, are fluctuating, but this is going to be an awful long, a lot of time for people. For example, you try to do all this in 1 month. I don't know if they're doing it for a whole week or if people have the ability to do it. So just a thought. I mean, I don't know. It looks
Well,
like
it,
February. So
it's a good thought, but part of the concern is that once the new commissioners are appointed, they really won't be able to do their jobs until they are trained.
right.
And so it's a competing thing of the time commitment for the training and wanting to get the commission up and running. And maybe a separate discussion that we may want to have at the end too is whether or not we ought to try to do some of these things in evening. Well, some of them are normally on weekends anyway. For example, the component 5 would normally be a Saturday event, but perhaps we ought to look at doing some of the events in the evening to accommodate the people who work full-time jobs and don't have a lot of flexibility.
It's required that commissioners cram all this in up front, that you got to get all this in. I wonder how many people will be able to make this type of time commitment. And perhaps there is, the training program should also really focus in on triaging what is important for everybody to know, because you can only retain so much at a point. So maybe there is a phased approach to the training that facilitates the process a little bit more. Just thought.
Okay. And then component 6 is an overview of the Brown Act and POBAR, which we have our legal counsel do. And does that look like a reasonable amount of time for that? 2 hours?
That would be, Doug. And see, that's one that could be done in the context of even a meeting, just whether there's a meeting. So, I mean, it may be one of those training things. It won't take long, and it could be done quickly, and it wouldn't take a lot of people's time. So I could do that however you like.
And then go on to a component 7. And this is kind of well, it's parliamentary, not parliament procedure. So I don't know why there, or parliamentary procedure. So not parliament procedure. No, but we need to give them an overview of the governing documents and the framework of the commission itself. And he may be able to do that in a shorter amount of time.
I mean, also, can you just assume or ask people to read all of these things ahead of time and then have a shorter meeting, maybe as Dwayne said, at a regular CPP meeting for people to ask questions about these procedures, about what they've read? Or is this how you do trainings now? Do you spend 4 hours talking about procedures and stuff?
Well, in the past, it hasn't been 4 hours, but in the past, we were looking at a little bit different structure. But yes, I mean, we would probably give them the materials in advance to look at, and I think we could shorten that. I wouldn't want to probably do it less than 3 hours, but we probably can do it in 3 hours instead of 4 hours. And the next component is training them on how to actually review a case. And a little bit of the trickiness here is that they will be determining how they're going to do their case review. And so we can train them on the key things to look at in evaluating a case and so forth. But in terms of, the report write-up and so forth, we can make recommendations, probably of how they should do it. And maybe we should, kind of tell them initially how we're doing it now, and until they have their permanent procedure adopted, and also decide how they want to implement that permanent procedure, they could, make revisions to that. But we want them to be able to, begin reviewing cases as soon as possible. And then the next two things, and Charmaine mentioned last week why she put 2 meetings on there, but I forget what the answer was. I know one was going to be reporting back on the ride-alongs, but that's not necessarily a priority. Or maybe it was, I think, no, it says regular business meeting.
Well, you have 2 meetings a month. So, I mean, I'm assuming that the new commissioners,
Thank you, Kate. That's what the answer was, what she was talking about.
wouldn't they also be attending the February meetings?
We probably would not be having meetings until they are trained, although we could. That's a good question.
And yeah, I mean, like Dwayne said, some of this stuff can actually be done at the regular meetings. Or not. I mean, if you cancel those meetings to do the training.
Right. And actually, I think that makes some sense in terms of doing some of the trainings on Tuesday evenings. Which would be a time when the commission would normally be meeting. And so I think,
And maybe you don't have that secret meeting, what's it called, the closed session ahead of time, because you're not going to be able to discuss cases.
Right.
But you would just have the regular open session meeting. Of course, now you only have it once a month, but maybe you'd just have open session meetings twice a month from 6 to 8, and have, some of these discussions and trainings at that point, just to kind of get people in the routine of, yeah, we're meeting the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of every month.
And I've forgotten whether or not the training is open to the public. Maybe Dwayne can answer that question.
Yes, it should be, Chair. It should be. Except now those where you have off-site trainings, for example, in the police department, et cetera, we'd have to look at that, because I believe there's a provision in the Brown Act where, for example, you can't run all members of the public through certain parts of IA, et cetera, et cetera. But for, if you have, and this is what has been done in the past, I can tell you as a city attorney, to avoid some of those issues, you sometimes, and I know it makes it difficult, you have to have less than a quorum of the commission go into, if you want, for example, the commission to go through IA, and IA says, well, we can't have members of the public here while this training goes on. You have to have less than a quorum of commissioners there, so that you don't have what's called a meeting with IA. And so sometimes you have to have 4 people go through at a time or something like that. That way you don't have a quorum of commissioners present at any time, and there is no Brown Act implication. So that's something we'd have to work on. But if you have training sessions that involve a quorum of commissioners, that's a meeting. That's a meeting that's open to the public. Again, if you want to, do if you have to have a situation, for example, in the police department where they say, look, we can't have members of the public coming in seeing things, or we're not equipped to do that, then you need to have less than a quorum of commissioners go in sequence time. So maybe three commissioners go, you know, whatever. I mean, you have to repeat the training for less than a quorum.
So what's a quorum now? Is it 8?
I guess
I
it'll
can't remember. I
depend.
know it was
Yeah,
changed.
well,
It was
it'll be a
reduced.
quorum. It'll be, that's interesting because it'll be a
Yeah.
quorum of the new commission. Like, I guess that the interim bylaws would prevail until the permanent bylaws are approved by the council, and the quorum would be a majority of the seats that are filled.
So Chair, even as the commissioners are appointed, I mean, if you have, you know, if the council staggers the appointments of commissioners, you know, you could start cycling them through some of these areas where the public, you know, there's no public access, like the police department or simulator training or whatever. Maybe that's a thought, but.
Okay. Let's get, if you can scroll back up, Lena, let's look and see if we can identify which components we actually could do on a Tuesday evening. The Well, the first one could be done on a Tuesday evening. It would be kind of long, so it would be like from 6 to 10 or 5 to 9. It may be one it would make more sense to do it during the longer ones. Would probably make sense to do it during the daytime, perhaps on a Saturday. Component 2, well, that'll be at the headquarters, and so it doesn't make sense to do in the evening. Go back to component 3. Scroll down if you would. Component 3 could be done at the time on a Tuesday evening, or in the component 4 would not, because that also is at a police facility. Scroll on down to component 5. Five could be. So 5, maybe make a note that would be something that we could do in an evening, preferably at the time the commission normally meets. Component 6 definitely could be. Component 7 definitely could be. Component 8 could be as well. So many of these components could be done as part of regular meetings or special meetings, or just plain training meetings. Like, I guess a training meeting would be a type of special meeting where they wouldn't conduct any business other than training. You wouldn't have public comment except comment on the training itself. Okay, and then we were going to add items for continuing education. And so far we have unhoused, disability, and mental health. It occurs to me that we probably ought to have some of the issues that Dwayne raised in terms of having a presentation from a community point of view, or at least an independent point of view on use of force evaluations and laws of arrest and search and seizure. You know, and those could be done, you know, maybe on a rolling basis, you know, a half-hour presentation at each meeting. Are there any other topics that come to your mind, Dwayne, that we might want to put on as a continuing education
No, Doug, I think those are good. And I think that as issues come up or arise, with the commission, in particularly the issues that you see when you go through case reviews, I think are going to be very, very important. I think that issues, and it will be interesting, just like I say, to hear the department's perspective on pretext stops, in terms of using pretext as a basis for stopping people. It's very, very controversial. It always brings up issues of race and class, etc. Hearing their perspective in terms of why they do it, what they look for, etc., and having a discussion and having some legal framework for that would be really, really interesting. In terms of, and this is continuing education, because you can't cram all this into commissioners, up front. In terms of internal affairs investigations, of course, the department is going to give you a perspective in terms of what they do, but I think there is a lot of variation and there's a lot of controversy around that particular concept in terms of the propriety as to how these investigations are conducted, what's included and what is not included. I think that would be a good topic for continuing education, as well as use of force, necessity of shooting, deadly shoots, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be a continuing theme throughout there. So I think all those will be good ongoing topics.
Okay, so let me help on dealing with the minutes. We have unhoused issues, disability, mental health, use of force, laws of arrest, search and seizure. I'd like to add evaluation of discrimination complaints.
Right.
Evaluation of whether an investigation is thorough, and evaluating officer involved shootings.
All good topics.
And I'm also
Those
looking at
can
the
be done
watchdog.
and those can be done on a rotating basis. You don't
Exactly.
need to try to cram all that into one.
And I have a 1 o'clock meeting, so I have a hard stop, which is why we had to move this meeting. And I appreciate everybody's flexibility on that. And really the only other item is discussing future meetings. I think we can when it comes time to begin meeting in person. So I guess, first of all, do you think we can move it to every other week? And if so, would you prefer a early morning meeting that would conclude by 10 o'clock or so? Or would you prefer a meeting that starts, say, after 2:30?
Well, I have two questions. One is, what would be the location? Will you have the new office space by then, or we're still talking about downtown somewhere?
Probably would be using the old office space in the CPP building, Civic Center Plaza. And so it would be downtown. Either one would be downtown. So Nancy, any thoughts from you? Oh, hi, Charmaine. I didn't see you here. I'm not sure how much you got of for the discussion, previous discussion, but is Nancy still here?
I'm promoting her.
Okay. And we probably also want to check on Diana's availability.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as time, I mean, if you care about my time issues, generally the afternoon would be better for me, but you can also check with the rest of your committee members. I never really know. I like the noon hour because courts don't operate between 12 and 1:30. So I never really know what my schedule is going to be on a Friday, but generally afternoons I would prefer.
Okay. And which raises the issue of also days. Charmaine, is would a Friday after, you said Friday afternoons may be problematic.
Yes, especially as we go further into the afternoon, late afternoon.
So if we did like a 2:30 on a Friday afternoon, would that work?
Would that work for everyone?
At 2:30 on Friday afternoons.
Are Thursdays an option? Just throwing that out there.
Thursdays, I would need to do it. Thursdays are probably not an option for me. Unless we did it, at 3:30.
So we would need to make sure the agenda is posted Monday.
Okay, so it looks like our,
Faster turnaround time.
well, it looks like, would, would at 2:30 on a Friday work, Charmaine, or,
That's fine with me.
okay, so let me, Nancy, what about you? I'm not, she may still be connecting.
It disconnected.
Well, let me just check individually with Nancy and Diana, and we'll tentatively, our two options will be 3:30 on Thursdays or 2:30 on Fridays, and we'll do it every other week.
I'm also in the middle of trying to get in touch with arts and cultures
Yes.
to see if we can use the conference room. I had requested Fridays in the afternoons, but I'll throw in Thursdays as well as I follow up.
Okay, and so then I will check with Nancy and Diana. And anything else we need to go over today? Okay, then we'll go ahead and plan on meeting next week. So we'll have some updates for you. And we'll go from there. So goodbye, everybody. Have a good weekend, long weekend.